Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's PPP unit presentation. My name is Prima Atagonza, and I chair the African chapter of WAPPP. I also head the PPP and infrastructure portfolio at the African Legal Support Facility. This morning, I am honored to host the Republic of Kenya's PPP Directorate. Kenya has and continues to establish itself as a market leader in the PPP space on the African continent. The country recently enacted a new PPP investor-friendly law, which I am sure our speaker is going to tell us all about this morning. Our speaker this morning is Mr. Rotich Cherono. He's an accomplished PPP projects and infrastructure development specialist involved in the infrastructure space. He works in a number of sectors like energy, water, sanitation, waste, transport, and health. He currently works with the PPP Directorate at the National Treasury in Kenya as a projects officer, and he provides technical input to contracting authorities in the entire span of PPP projects. He works during the identification, development, procurement, and structuring of PPP projects across the above-mentioned sectors. Previously, he worked with companies like NL Green Power. He's also worked with Greenmax, and he's majorly supported developers for on-grid and distributed energy generation projects in Southern Africa. A very warm welcome to you, Mr. Rotich. Before I hand over to him, I would like to give a few housekeeping rules. You're welcome to ask your questions to find out more about the country and the opportunities that are available to investors. Please write your questions in the Q&A box, where we will reserve them for the Q&A session at the end. Again, a very warm welcome to you, Mr. Rotich. Please educate us about what's happening in Kenya, and there'll be loads of questions hopefully coming for you at the end of the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prima. I'm very delighted and excited to be able to join you here today in this forum to be able to discuss pertinent issues surrounding the PPP infrastructure space, particularly here in Kenya. I'm going to be making a brief presentation on the recent developments surrounding the PPP space here in Kenya. My presentation later on will touch on measures that we are taking to address climate-related concerns in PPP projects. Now, but to begin with, I'm going to start by giving you a high-level overview of the macroeconomic environment that we are operating in here in Kenya, to be able to give you a sense of the kind of environment that the PPP program is operating in. Now, from the chart that you are able to see on your screen, you can see that Kenya has been experiencing very strong growth. If you look at the trajectory of growth, maybe beginning in the early 2000s, there's an upward trend in the average compounded rate of growth annually. So it started around 4.4%, then it moved to around 4.8%. Now, over the past 5 years, I think we've been doing an average of around 5.6%. This growth has put the country on a tremendous trajectory in terms of expansion in GDP. In the past decade, in 2013, we were doing around the 12th position in terms of the size of our economy, but now we are the 7th largest economy in sub-Saharan Africa. So that gives you a sense of the environment in which the opportunities around the PPP space, the kind of opportunities that would emerge from the PPP space. Similarly, if you look at our inflation or the macroeconomic health of the economy, inflation is generally within target. We have a target of around 5%, noting that there are significant inflation concerns globally. You will see that Kenya is doing decently well in terms of managing its macroeconomic health. Moving on, the next chart shows you, the diversity of our economy. Kenya is not a one sort of sector economy. We have a very diversified economy, and this diversity is what you will see later on generates a lot of opportunities in terms of the kind of opportunities within different sectors for PPP projects. So You will see that we have projects in the road sector, the housing sector, and you can see this from a macroeconomic point of view, where you can see the diversity of economy in terms of growth. Agriculture is no longer, is still a significant portion of the economy, but you can see a strong push by other sectors of the economy, non-agriculture sectors of the economy, in terms of its significance to the overall contribution to the economy. On the other side, you can also see that incomes are growing. So it means people are having more purchasing power to be able to pay for products and services. And that also translates into the kind of opportunities that we're able to bring forth with respect to public-private partnerships. Again, if you look at that chart also, it gives you a sense, which I was talking on earlier, around the diversification of the economy. The economy is very well diversified, growth emanating from various sectors. So again, that translates to the kind of opportunities that we are able to bring forth in terms of PPPs. Now, I'll touch briefly on the PPP legal framework. And PPPs are not new to Kenya. Since independence, Kenya has been doing PPPs, and we have quite a track record in terms of PPPs. Only that many of the PPPs were centered in the energy space. There were not much PPPs around other infrastructure sectors. Very few of them were done. And based on this experience, and maybe most of these contracts, most of these PPPs were regulated by contract. There was no specific PPP law that was driving these contracts. So the investor feedback from this experience was that we needed more clarity in terms of law to be able to expand or to be able to mainstream the PPP program into the development agenda of the country. So in 2011, the government put in place a policy called the PPP Policy 2011 that sort of declared government intention to be able to mainstream public-private partnerships as a source of public finance to complement other sources of financing infrastructure projects in Kenya. So the regulatory framework went through some evolutionary process since that period, culminating in the enactment of the Ppp Act 2013. Subsequently, we developed regulations and put in place other regulatory measures such as FCCL framework that sort of governed the sort of support measures that the government could put in place or could use to support PPP projects. Now, there were some challenges around the PPP Act 2013, and based on those and based on the lessons learned from those challenges, the country embarked on revamping the law, and this culminated in the enactment of the Ppp Act 2021. So what are some of the challenges that we saw in the Act of 2013 that made the government change or put in place a new law? The first one was we had a very bureaucratic institutional structure that started all the way from contracting authorities to the PPP directorate, the PPP committee, all the way to the cabinet. And there was need to revamp this process in order to create efficiency, and so that is what contributed to the enactment of the Ppp Act 2013. Another issue was the absence of timelines for various processes. This was a major complaint, particularly from investors, given that it took a lot of time before government could be able to respond to proposals that had been put to government. So the feedback from the investor community was we needed timelines, and that was put forward in the PPP, in the new Act of 2021. Sorry. Another issue was limited and rigid procurement processes. So we did not have, so the procurement options were limited. So it was mainly related to privately initiated proposals and competitive procurements. We've since expanded those procurement options to include restricted tendering, direct procurement, to sort of give impetus or give government options in terms of procurement of PPP projects. Another issue was Kenya operates in a devolved system of governance, where we have a national government and 47 county governments. So the PPP Act of 2013 did not capture that spirit of devolution. So there was a lot of pushback, particularly from county governments, in terms of acceptance of the law. So this is one of the issues that the new law addresses. Another issue was unsustainability of the PPP program, in the sense that there was no kitty to be able to support the activities of the PPP program. This relates to operational expenditure, paying transaction advisors, project preparation fees. So the new act introduced measures to be able to allow the program to be able to raise fees to be able to support activities of the program. As an example, we introduced a review fee for public-private partnerships, for privately initiated proposals. We also introduced success fees for projects that achieve financial close. And all these monies are intended to be able to support activities of the PPP program to be able to create long-term sustainability. The last issue was related to local content principles. We realized that majority of the projects that were undertaken did not have sufficient local content. So there was a need to be able to capture local content principles in the Act. And since the enactment of the Act, we are now working on guidelines to be able to operationalize the Act. Now, just going to give a broad, high-level overview of some of the measures that the PPP Act 2021 achieved. So, as I mentioned previously, we've simplified the institutional architecture for PPPs. Approvals are now mainly centered on the PPP Directorate, which was previously called the PPP Unit. In the new Act, the PPP Unit was elevated to a fully fledged directorate within the National Treasury, with a Director General, so that hierarchical structure sort of strengthened its capacity to be able to drive the PPP agenda in the country. So some of the approvals that were in the PPP committee were delegated down to the PPP Directorate. So the approvals at the PPP committee level mainly center on approvals on feasibility studies and approvals on project agreements. Other approvals have been centered around the PPP Directorate. The other issue is creation of efficiency. The number is just with the simplification of the institutional architecture, we were able to reduce the number of approvals. So, for example, we no longer have cabinet approvals except for government support measures. We've also introduced timelines for key processes. So, for instance, once we receive a privately initiated proposal, we should be able to dispense with it in terms of a response within 90 days. And that's well captured in the law. We've also created flexibility in terms of admission of PIPs previously, and this is actually something we took from feedback from the private sector. Previously, there was concern in the private sector that what we asked of them, which was to develop a fully fledged proposal, which is not cheap, costs a lot of money to be able to put in place a fully fledged feasibility study for a project, and yet one may not know whether the proposal will be accepted or not by government. So we sort of created a structured process, or once we receive our privately initiated proposal, we can enter into a project development agreement that sort of allows the developer to fulfill some of the gaps that may be identified in their proposal. So we can have a structured way in which we can allow the developer to be able to develop their project. That's one of the issues that we addressed. We also, as mentioned earlier, we expanded the scope of arrangements and procurement models. One of the PPP arrangements that we introduced was joint venture partnerships, which was not there in the earlier law. And there are some PPP models that may not fit the BOT model or structure. So we've allowed for more structures to be able to expand that sort of engagements that we can have, or the government can have with the private sector. Earlier, I mentioned the issue of devolution and the entrenchment of the spirit of sustainability into the PPP program, as well as local content principle. I think I've spoken earlier around the last three issues. So in terms of the PPP pipeline, we have a very diversified project portfolio ranging from the road sector, transport, port, energy. And maybe just to give you a quick background, there's been a lot of the business model around the energy sector has been well established in the country as a PPP. So the country has been moving towards a process of trying to establish more workable business models for PPP projects. And we are very excited to note that we've been able to achieve, we've been able to demonstrate PPP models in other sectors, particularly in the transport sector, where we've recently implemented a 27-kilometer PPP road project worth around, that raised around $800 million in investment. This is a major achievement since we've been able now to demonstrate PPP models in other sectors, particularly in the transport sector. We've also reached financial close on other PPP projects in the road sector. These were annuity projects. Basically, the business model around the annuity projects was based on an availability payment out of an annuity fund. So you can see a track record in terms of trying to expand the kind of business models that the PPP program is able to attain. Again, we have a number of projects that have reached commercial close that we are working on. We have the Nairobi, Nakuru, Mosamit Highway PPP project. This is going to be one of the largest PPP infrastructure projects in Africa, estimated at close to $1.5 billion. We also have a couple of energy projects and a couple of annuity projects that are in the pipeline that we are trying to advance towards financial close. Again, we are very excited to note that we also are we have actually reached commercial close. We are about to reach financial close on a housing project. Again, this is a major achievement given that we are now demonstrating that we are able to demonstrate a business model in the housing sector. So as you can see now, we are expanding the scope in terms of what we are able to attain in terms of PPP business models. Now, we have a number of exciting projects under development. One of them is a smart street lighting project. This is a project that we are implementing together with the PIDGE, Private Infrastructure Development Group. And it's a project that's currently under feasibility study. We do hope to be able to come to market maybe sometime towards early next year, the first quarter of next year. And we are very excited about this project. So the whole idea is to retrofit and install new street lighting in the city of Nairobi. So the target is to install around 100,000 streetlights in the city of Nairobi, and to be able to save on energy consumption. So the county government of Nairobi is currently spending about $8 million on energy-related costs related to street lighting. So we do hope that this PPP project will be able to drive efficiency and bring down that expenditure in terms of cost of energy consumption, and at the same time create ambience and improve the living standards in the city, given that we'll be able to introduce, we'll be able to better light the city. So that will also be able to drive the level of the level of living in the city, and be able to drive also the economy. Another project that we are working on is an intelligent transport management system for the city of Nairobi. This is a privately initiated proposal by one of the leading technology providers globally. So we are very excited. We are now in the project development. We are going to enter into the intention is to enter into a project development agreement with the developer to be able to allow them to be able to tailor the project to suit the needs of the government. So this is another project that we are very excited, and it's going to be able to expand the scope of PPP models that we are going to be able to develop as a country. Another project that is also under development is the second Nyali project. This is a transport sector project. So the intention is to develop another bridge alongside the existing Nyali bridge in order to decongest the existing bridge. So this is a project in the pipeline. We hope to be able to be in market sometime in the first quarter of next year. Another project that we are developing and is a transmission line. So as I mentioned earlier, many of the projects that have been done in the energy sector were related to energy generation. So the government is looking for opportunities to be able to also see ways in which transmission lines could also be developed by the private sector. So this is another project. This is a project that is being done as a privately initiated proposal, and we are in the process of entering into a joint development agreement with the investor to be able to advance the development of this project. Another project that we are working on is a cancer project in a part of the country called Meru. So this is a part of the country where there's been a lot of prevalence of cancer related diseases. So this is a project that we are very excited about, in the sense that it's going to address a very pertinent need in a very particular area of the country where there is a significant problem as relates to cancer. So we do hope to be able to come to market with this project also sometime in the next first or second quarter of the next year. The project is currently under feasibility study. Another project that we are developing is a health sciences, a college for health sciences. So basically, Moi Teaching and Referral Hospitals is one of the major national health referral facilities in the country. So there is a lot of need. They've experienced a lot of need to build capacity in terms of training for nurses and other healthcare professionals. And they are not able to meet they're not able to obtain enough budgetary support to be able to develop this facility to be able to train the healthcare professionals. So we are looking at ways in which we can involve the private sector, because there is a lot of demand for the training. How can we then develop a partnership where we can develop a college or expand the existing college to be able to address the human resource need for health professionals? So these are projects that we are just about to procure a transaction advisor, and we are very excited, given that it's going also to be able to drive the business models that we're able to do as a country. Now, with respect to climate change for PPP projects, what is the prevailing situation? So in Kenya, at the national policy level, we enacted a Climate Change Act 2016, which is intended to provide enhanced response to climate change and provide mechanisms and measures to be able to allow the country to achieve a low carbon climate resilient development. So the Act is the first climate change dedicated legislation in Africa. So through the Act requires government to develop 5-year action plans on measures to address climate change. So the action plan, starting in 2018 and ending in 2022, has 4 major themes revolving around water, housing and sanitation, transport and infrastructure, as well as renewable energy. So if you look at the kind of projects that we are doing as the directorate, we have sort of centered those projects around this action plan. Prima, I'm struggling a little bit to move the presentation forward. Okay, I've seen. Thank you. So if you look at the PPP projects that we are doing as the PPP Directorate, we've prioritized screening to be able to tailor them towards this action plan. That's part of the climate. That's part of the national policy. So in terms of measures that we are undertaking as the PPP Directorate, we are prioritizing climate resilient projects and sectors. So if you look at the previous slides that I showed, you will see energy projects. You'll also see sanitation as well as water projects. We are still in the process of trying to clarify the business model around the water sector, and we've appointed a transaction advisor to be able to advise us on that. This is the same case also with the sanitation sector, where we have projects under development, particularly revolving around management of solid wastes. Those are projects that we've procured a transaction advisor to be able to advise on the right business models for those projects. The Ppp Act 2021 also has provided climate resilience as one of the major criterions for the identification and selection of projects. So previously there was no mandate to be able to, in terms of screening of projects. Now we've introduced a mandate on climate resilience when we are screening and selecting projects for implementation of PPPs. Now, to expand our capacity and know-how around climate resilience, we've engaged with the World Bank through an advisory to be able to develop a policy around climate resilience. So we should be able to develop or strengthen the criteria for selection of projects on climate resilience, as well as develop a policy around climate resilience. So this advisory is currently ongoing. So in terms of contractual adjustment mechanisms, I would say we would note that force majeure risks arising from climate-related activities are currently underwritten by government, and this creates significant contingent liability risk for GOK. In terms of how we see force majeure risk, we typically classify them as non-political and political. Political events are those that government takes on a compensation mechanism, or or compensates in the event of crystallization of such force majeure events. For non-political events, we try to find ways through insurance or either relief as an adjustment mechanisms. For instance, during the COVID period, there was a lot of issues surrounding the capacity of both the private sector and government to be able to meet its obligations. So that was a force majeure event that we dealt with through relief events. Insurance is also another avenue for dealing with force majeure events related to climate issues, but it's not typically very available in this part of the world. So we also look at opportunities to maybe renegotiate and vary the contract in the case of, in the event those force majeure events crystallize. But the first call of options is typically through relief. And if the situation really persists, then the government will find ways of compensating for such events. So, what are some of the gaps that that are there in terms of ways in which government can address climate risks? Number one is that we find that when you climate-proof projects, it creates a lot of cost. We have some of the projects that we are doing. You realize that, you know, the initiative or the attempt to climate-proof projects create affordability concerns around the project, since you have to now, for example, if you are looking at the transport sector, for instance, you would find situations where you have to maybe create more bridges, maybe to allow, you know, more interaction between, or between infrastructure as well as wildlife, noting that Kenya is a very ecosystem-rich country. So you find that it adds to the cost of the project, and PPP's project is also a balance between affordability as well as climate resilience. So you find that there is a problem. We find situations where affordability concerns arise from measures to address climate concerns. We also find that there's not enough understanding around climate risks that may occur from these projects. There's no full inventory around climate-related risks, so government may not at all times be in a position to be able to anticipate all the risks that may emanate from these projects. So sometimes government could take on too much risk, or what I would call contingent liability risk, onto its own books. And that would be a gap in terms of addressing climate risks. Other issues relate to lack of insurance or limited insurance, and these I've touched with previously. So there is very limited insurance available to address climate-related risks, and the end result is that government has to take up this risk, and this creates, although it may not be a direct risk at the moment, it creates significant contingent liability risk for government, which it may not be able to quantify at this point in time. So in terms of the way forward with respect to climate related issues, there needs to be a lot of capacity building, especially in the public sector, to be able to build know-how and knowledge around climate resilience issues. I would say that's one of the biggest gaps within government in terms of lack of capacity around these issues. There needs also to be development of risk mitigation products, sort of like to remove some of the contingent liability risks from government, perhaps through creation of insurance products to be able to take on some of these risks. This will be able to be achieved through enhanced partnerships between the government and the private sector, especially the insurance industry, to find more innovative and cost-efficient solutions around these issues. There is also need to mainstream or to develop climate-related risk assessment tools to allow government to be able to have visibility and quantify some of these risks related to climate change. That's the end of my presentation, and I'm now very happy to be able to take on questions.
Thank you very much, Rotich. That was an excellent presentation. I think we have gone to Kenya School of Law and a lot of other technical schools just to understand what's happening in the Kenya space. We have 10 minutes for a Q&A session, about 12 minutes actually, which is more than enough time for us to answer some questions. I'll start with the first question, which is from Juanita. Juanita is a CP3P trainer, and she's from Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. So her first question is, can you tell us the average time between commercial clause and financial clause in Kenya? And what are the bottlenecks to reach financial clause?
The general timelines in terms of, we try our best to be able to achieve financial close in the shortest time possible. We have a project in the housing sector that we've really strived from actually project conception to financial close. We anticipate it's going to be around a maximum of 2 years from project inception. So it varies, depends on the issues from project to project. So I've just given you a particular instance of a project where from project inception to financial close, we anticipate it's going to take a maximum of 2 years. On other projects, we've had situations where there were issues that may not have been addressed during the initial project preparation stages, that then sort of slowed down the process towards attainment of financial close. And that requires going forward to, the government to be able to take time to be able to address most of the issues during the project preparation stage, so that the stage between commercial close and financial close has the the fewest issues. That one will be able to accelerate the time that it takes for a project to reach financial close.
Okay, excellent. Our next question is from Prosper Lunetera. Prosper is a program officer with the Ministry of Finance in Accra, Ghana. And Prosper asks, are there instances where you cannot meet the timelines that are in the PPP Act, considering, of course, that projects are of different sizes and have different requirements? So what happens when you can't meet the timelines within the PPP Act?
So the way we actually, this is work in progress in the sense that currently we have live projects that we are trying to be able to meet timelines as prescribed in law. But through the regulations, we are also giving some discretion to the PPP. We're also trying to give some discretion to the PPP directorate to be able to grant exemptions in terms of the timelines in instances where situations arise that maybe do not allow us to meet timelines as envisaged in the law.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So it's project by project basis as it is everywhere else. And I
Yes,
know with
but
the
at least you
newly.
can, yeah, yeah. But at least you can see the commitment of government to be able to drive projects in the fastest time possible.
Okay. Okay. All right. Our next question is from Maurice Kum. Mbappe, who's a consultant with MKM Services. And Maurice asks, at what level do local private companies take part in various PPP projects in Kenya, i.e. a PPP project inclusive?
Yes, PPP projects are inclusive. Number one, nothing prevents local private companies to be able to participate in PPP projects. Number two, we've been through the law, we've put in place measures through local content principle to be able to ensure that there is participation of local companies in PPP projects, and this is something that we are trying to, provide guidelines through the regulations. We are going to develop guidelines and regulations specifically on local content principle, and we'll be able to advise when once the regulations are out. And
Okay.
we also, during the engagement, during the development of the guidelines and regulations, we'll be able to engage with the private sector to ensure that their concerns are taken into place.
Agreed. We also have a question from Isaac, who's a senior manager at Deloitte. And Isaac asks, how about viability gap funding in Kenya? So what is there room for? Is it happening? What is the environment for viability gap funding in Kenya?
Currently, in terms of, we've not had situations where, there is need for viability gap funding, but we've not been able to address it through budget, noting budgetary constraints. So we'll be looking to development partners, especially for socially oriented projects, to be able to come in and support these projects. One of the projects that we are really looking for support from the private sector, or not from development partners, is the Meru Cancer Care Project. We believe this is a project that's very ideal in terms of for support from multilateral partners, given the nature of the need that it's addressing. So we'll be looking at specific projects that we can draw upon support from development partners.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rotich. Our next question is from a fellow Kenyan, Sharon Jiraine. And Sharon asks, does the government of Kenya take unsolicited proposals? And if so, is there a guideline for the submission and assessment?
Yes, so this is one of the areas that we addressed in the PPP Act 2021. We have a whole section on privately initiated proposals, section 40 through 44 of the PPP Act 2021. So we have it spells out in precise detail how PPP privately initiated proposals are supposed to be dealt with by government.
Okay. A lot of the Kenyans are bringing in the questions this morning. So we also have Sam Bayer, who's a PPP program officer with the World Bank in Nairobi, Kenya. And Sam asks, what are some of the ways that the PPP Directorate helps the line ministries identify and bring quality projects for consideration as PPPs? That's a very great question. So how are you working with the contracting agencies to ensure that we're having quality projects that are being brought to market?
So currently, the National Treasury is implementing a system so that to ensure that all projects. We're implementing a national system to be able to channel all projects that are going to be funded by government, either through budget or through PPPs, to be first of all come to the National Treasury for assessment whether they will qualify as PPPs or not. So at this level, we'll be able to select, the intention is to be able to select projects at the national level through this system. So there is an information management system that is currently being developed to be able to channel all projects that are being proposed by contracting authorities to the National Treasury. Through this system, we hope to be able to identify projects that are suitable for development as PPPs.
Excellent, excellent. The government of Kenya is using technology to sort of enhance what you're doing in the PPP space. We have another question from Milton, who heads partnerships at Open Capital in Kenya. And Milton asks whether the new PPP regime in Kenya has the Swiss challenge provisions.
So it's well clarified in the law.
Okay. Thank you very much. And Lucila also asks, could you expand more on the project development agreements and review fees with the developers?
So the review fee specifically relate to privately initiated proposals. So the fee is around 0.5%, the law of 0.5% or $50,000 of the project cost, of the estimated project cost. So that's around that concerns the review fee, around $50,000 or 0.5% of the estimated project cost. Number two is on success fees, and these are paid at financial close once the project achieves financial close.
Thank you very much. I'm not too sure if there are any more questions, but for the people that are asking for the presentation, it will be shared after this. And if there are no more questions, we have 3 minutes to the next session. Thank you very much, Rotich. I'll ask you to just give closing remarks, invite all the investors on the call to invest in Kenya, because from your presentation, it is clear that the country is ready and the government is making the best efforts to make sure that it provides a great environment for doing business in Kenya. Over to you, Rotich.
Thank you so much, Prima. It's been a pleasure to be able to engage with the participants here today. As the government of Kenya, we are very excited to be able to engage with investors to be able to develop and expand the PPP program in Kenya. As you will note, we've developed a new law, and through the new law, we've been able to clarify some of the issues that were raised by investors previously. So we believe now we have a very investor-friendly law that should be able to ensure that we are able to drive the PPP agenda of in Kenya forward. Thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure engaging with you.
Thank you very much, Rotich. Thank you very much to all the 77 to 80 participants that have stayed with us throughout the presentation. And in case you have any questions, you can always reach us on the WAPPP website. I know that Rotich is available to also answer any further questions you might have from the presentation. So thank you very much, and we hope to see you in the next session. Have a good day, everybody. Bye.